Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're venturing into, well, a pretty fascinating and maybe slightly unexpected topic, quantum economics.
Yeah, before you start picturing, complex physics equations flying around.
Right, that's not quite it. We're not talking about literally applying quantum physics to, say, your investments.
No, not directly. It's more about exploring how some fundamental ideas from quantum mechanics, things like uncertainty.
And how just looking at something can change it, that measurement idea.
Exactly. And also that strange interconnectedness, entanglement, how these concepts might give us, well, a fresh way to understand money, value, the whole economic picture.
It really does make you rethink things because, our listener wants to get a solid grasp on these complex ideas, but efficiently.
Right. And David Orrell's book, Quantum Economics, it gives us this unique framework. It helps unpack those tricky bits about money and value by seeing patterns shared with the quantum world. It's not a literal one-to-one mapping.
And it challenges some basic assumptions, doesn't it? Like, we usually define economics through money, right? The flow of cash. But then you hear Mervyn King, former head of the Bank of England, saying, economists sometimes talk for ages without even mentioning money.
It's true. And standard textbooks often treat money as just like a neutral token, a placeholder in a giant border system.
Yeah, just oiling the wheels. But what if money itself is, well, more fundamental, maybe even has these quantum-like properties?
Well, and what's really interesting is how much reaction Orwell's book got. You've got people calling it essential reading.
Like Kate Raworth, who came up with donut economics. That's high praise.
Definitely. And James Derderian called it fascinating, funny, and wonderfully readable. Big endorsements.
But then you also have economists who are, let's say, less impressed, calling it misguided and maybe even simplistic.
And that kind of sharp disagreement, that polarity, it tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah, it signals he's poking at something foundational, something that challenges the status quo.
Exactly. And that's really our mission here today. To use this quantum lens, as Orwell puts it, and see what surprising insights pop out about money, value, economic behavior. We'll focus on part 2 of the book, The Quantum Economy.
Okay, sounds good. Let's dive in. Chapter 6 kicks off with the uncertainty principle. Now, in physics, that's Heisenberg, right? You can't perfectly know certain pairs of things like where a particle is and how fast it's moving at the exact same time.
Precisely. The more you pin down one, the fuzzier the other gets.
So how on earth does that connect to economics, to like buying groceries?
Well, Orwell draws a parallel to the idea of economic value. He suggests value has these two aspects that are kind of in tension. There's this subjective worth, what something really means to you personally.
Okay, like how much I want that coffee right now.
Right. And then there's the objective numerical price, the number on the tag. He links us back to old Pythagorean ideas, limited versus unlimited. Price is limited, a number. Worth is potentially unlimited, more fluid.
Ah, I think I see it. The price kind of fixes the value at that moment. It puts a boundary on the potentially unbounded feeling.
You got it. So the act of putting a price on something, the transaction, it's like a measurement. It collapses the possibilities into a single number for that instant.
So buying a cookie for $1, that's a simple measurement. The value is $1 right then.
Yeah, pretty straightforward, almost trivial measurement, as he says. But contrast that with, say, haggling in a market.
Or buying a house.
Exactly. The price isn't fixed beforehand. It emerges from the back and forth.
Yeah.
And think about pure barter before standard money. The question, how much, didn't even have a consistent answer.
Right. Apples for bread today, maybe apples for something else tomorrow. A cacophony of possibilities, as Orwell puts it.
So when things like the Sumerian shekel or the Egyptian dabin, these early forms of money based on silver or grain came along?
They gave a way to put a number on value, to reduce it.
Essentially, yes. To convert that subjective worth into a quantity. Like freezing a moment in time, you capture the position, but lose the sense of continuous movement.
Okay. So the actionable insight here for us.
It's really about being mindful that the stated price, the number you see, might not capture the full story of its value to you.
Recognizing the gap between the limited price and the maybe unlimited personal worth or significance.
Precisely. Just be aware of that subjective layer beneath the objective number. It's a useful distinction.
Got it. Okay, let's move to Chapter 7, Quantum Games. This sounds intriguing. It starts with quantum logic versus classical logic.
Yeah, so classical logic is our usual binary stuff. Yes, no, true, false, 1 or 0.
Right, straightforward.
Quantum logic, though, allows for superposition. The idea that a system can be in multiple states at once until you measure it. Think Schrodinger's famous cat, both alive and dead until you peak.
Always the cat. Okay, so multiple states at once. How does that play out differently?
Well, a key difference is commutativity. In classical logic, the order doesn't usually matter. If A is true and B is true, checking A then B gives the same result as checking B then A.
Makes sense.
But in quantum logic, measurements aren't always commutative. Measuring A first might actually change the system, affecting the outcome when you then measure B. The order matters.
Okay, that feels a bit counterintuitive. Can you give an example related to how we think?
Orrell uses the tomato example. Is it a fruit or a vegetable?
The classic debate.
Exactly. If you ask someone, how much is a tomato like a fruit? You get one answer. Ask separately, how much is it like a vegetable? You get another.
Okay.
But if you ask them together, or in the opposite order, the combined judgment might not simply be the sum of the parts. It's like the concepts fruit and vegetable interfere with each other in our mind.
Like waves interfering in physics?
Sort of, yeah. A cognitive interference. It suggests our mental processing isn't always strictly classical or sequential in that way.
Wow. So the order I consider things in a decision, maybe salary first, then commute time for a job offer versus the other way around, could actually nudge me towards a different final feeling or choice.
That's the implication. And there's even research on word associations suggesting related words can act a bit like entangled particles, showing correlations that seem to defy simple classical explanation. They obey these linguistic versions of Bell's inequalities.
That's why. Okay, so the actionable insight from quantum games.
It's basically awareness. Be conscious that the sequence in which you evaluate information or factors can influence your economic decisions. Don't just assume the outcome is fixed, regardless of the path you take mentally.
Try shuffling the deck sometimes when thinking things through.
Yeah, it might reveal biases or effects you wouldn't otherwise notice. Be aware of the quantum games your own mind might be playing.
Right. Chapter 8. Entangled clouds. Entanglement, that's the really spooky quantum one, isn't it? Linked particles, instant connection over distance.
That's the one. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. Two particles linked, measure one, and you instantly know something about the other, no matter how far apart.
So how does that relate to, say, the economy?
Orrell argues the economy is full of entanglement, these deep interconnections. Financial instruments are a prime example. Take a mortgage.
Okay. Debtor and creditor.
Exactly. The moment that loan is made, the debtor and the creditor become formally entangled. Their financial fates are linked through that contract. What happens to one directly impacts the other.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can't have the loan without both parties being tied together. But Orrell suggests banknotes took entanglement to another level, compared to older things like tally sticks.
Right. Tally sticks often represented specific individual debts between known parties meant to be canceled out. Banknotes started as receipts for gold, something tangible.
Okay.
But because gold is fungible, one bit is like any other banks or goldsmiths realized they could issue more notes than the gold they actually held. People trusted the note, not necessarily the specific piece of gold behind it.
Fractional reserve banking, basically.
Yes. And Orrell calls this asymmetry breaking. It created a new kind of entanglement based on trust in the system, in the bank, rather than a direct link to a physical object or a specific counterparty.
So the entanglement became more abstract, more systemic.
Exactly. And this leads to the idea that money creation itself, especially by banks making loans, is an act of entanglement.
When the loan is made, new money appears, and instantly you have a debtor and creditor linked.
Precisely. Debt and credit are created simultaneously, two sides of the same coin, entangling the parties. Orrell really emphasizes that debt isn't just a consequence of money. In our system, it's fundamental to how money originates.
He uses that analogy of the sovereign's energy forging money with tally sticks, creating an asset and a debt simultaneously out of nothing.
It's a powerful image. It highlights the constructed relational nature of modern money.
Okay, so thinking of debt as this fundamental entanglement, what's the key takeaway, the actionable insight here?
It's about recognizing these connections. Every financial act, taking a loan, making an investment, even just buying something, creates ripples, creates connections, creates a form of entanglement in the wider economy.
So understand you're part of this web.
Yes. Be aware of the relationships and dependencies that are formed through finance. It's not just isolated transactions. It's building a network of mutual obligations and influences. That awareness can foster more responsible financial behavior.
Makes sense. Okay, Chapter 9 moves to measuring the economy. Now, traditional economics often looks for predictable laws, right? Like classical physics.
Yeah, the aim is often to build models that can forecast outcomes, assuming things move towards a stable equilibrium. It's quite mechanistic.
But the quantum view embraces uncertainty and complexity instead.
Exactly. It suggests the economy is less like a clockwork machine and more like a complex, evolving system. Orrell champions agent-based modeling as an alternative approach.
Agent-based modeling, what's that?
Instead of looking top-down at aggregates, it models the economy from the bottom up. You simulate lots of individual agents, people, firms, each with their own rules, preferences, maybe even learning and adapting.
And you let them interact.
Right, and you see what patterns emerge from those interactions. And these models can actually reproduce things like market bubbles and crashes.
Things that traditional models sometimes struggle with.
Often, yes.
Yeah.
They can generate that boom-bust behavior without needing to assume fixed, stable supply and demand curves.
So those famous crossing lines of supply and demand, that the quantum view is skeptical.
It questions how accurately they reflect reality. Orrell points to the identifiability problem. We only ever observe actual transactions happening at a certain price point. That's one data point.
Okay.
But supply and demand curves are two distinct relationships. Trying to derive both from just the transaction data is mathematically tricky, like solving for two unknowns with only one equation.
I see. It's an inference, not a direct observation of the curves themselves.
Right, and think about stock prices. Does a stock have a definite price before a trade happens? Or does the trade, the act of measurement, establish the price at that moment?
And maybe influences the next price.
Exactly. The measurement itself impacts the system's momentum. It's that quantum theme again. Observation affects reality.
Okay. So when we look at economic forecasts or models, what's the actionable insight?
Be cautious about models that present the economy as a simple, predictable machine. Appreciate the complexity that comes from all the individual agents interacting.
And remember that our own actions are buying and selling.
They're part of the process. They're measurements that contribute, even in small ways, to the overall market dynamics. Don't underestimate the emergent nature of economic phenomena.
Got it. Final chapter in this section, chapter 10, Economics. Sounds social.
Very much so. It explores how money shapes our relationships. Orrell argues that our focus on quantifiable, utility-driven transactions can sometimes flatten the richness of human connection.
Reducing things to just an exchange, based on equivalence.
Yeah, an instantaneous scope focused on profit or utility. He connects this to Ian McGilchrist's ideas about the brain hemispheres. The left hemisphere, liking things neat, measured, abstract, perhaps disconnected.
While the right hemisphere sees the bigger picture, the connections, the possibilities.
That's the analogy he draws, suggesting that an overemphasis on the purely monetary transactional view might be neglecting that more holistic, interconnected perspective.
So the way money works might subtly push us towards a more transactional view of each other.
That's the concern raised. He looks back historically, too, at people like John Law with early paper money schemes and Benjamin Franklin's support for colonial paper currency. These debates about what money is and what it does to society are not new.
And he brings in Frederick Soddy, the chemist.
Yes, the Nobel laureate, who also wrote extensively on economics. Soddy made this crucial distinction between what he called virtual wealth and real wealth.
Virtual wealth being money, debt, numbers in the system.
Exactly. Number-based claims, essentially debt. And real wealth being the actual stuff, goods, services, resources, energy. The things we actually use and need.
And Soddy saw a danger there.
He warned about the system's ability to create virtual wealth, debt money almost without limit, potentially far outpacing the growth of real wealth. He saw this as inherently unstable.
Leading to crises when the virtual bubble bursts.
Precisely. He even used an analogy from his own field, radioactive decay. It's a fundamentally quantum process, inherently probabilistic, with no stable classical equivalent. He saw a similar inherent instability in an economic system, obsessed with exponentially growing virtual claims on a finite real world.
That's a stark analogy. So the actionable insight from economics.
It's really a call for reflection. Think about how the dominance of monetary calculation might be shaping your own values, your relationships, your sense of community.
Are we losing sight of the real wealth because we're so focused on the virtual wealth?
That's the question to ponder. Consider the potential disconnect between financial metrics and genuine well-being or real-world resources. Are we measuring what truly matters or just what's easy to count in dollars and cents? It prompts a look at the bigger human picture within our economic activity.
Wow. Okay, this has been incredibly illuminating. Taking this deep dive through the quantum lens really does shift perspective. We've touched on uncertainty in value itself,
Yeah, the impact of measurement, how transactions aren't just passive recordings, but active
The
interventions.
entanglement, the hidden connections in finance.
And the limits of thinking about the economy as just a simple machine, ignoring the complex interactions of everyone involved.
It definitely provides a richer, maybe more realistic way to think about how dynamic and interconnected everything is.
Absolutely. It moves beyond simple cause and effect and embraces the interplay between, our subjective feelings and those objective market prices, which themselves are always shifting.
So, perhaps a final thought to leave with you, the listener. If the economy really does behave more like one of these complex quantum systems than a predictable machine.
What does that imply?
Mhm.
What kind of fundamental shifts might we need in how we think about finance, manage the economy, maybe even structure things globally?
Yeah, what are the implications for everything from how you manage your own money to how we design economic policy on a grand scale?
It's definitely something to mull over. We hope exploring these ideas from quantum economics gives you some fresh perspectives on the challenges and maybe the opportunities we face today.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.